What happens if one of those succeeds, and a lot of people die, or a very prominent person dies? How does that affect the Trump administration's political ability or interest in then continuing the deal?
Hello, welcome to Restoring America, a project of the Washington Examiner. Please be sure to subscribe on whichever platform you be watching. I'm Jeremiah Poff, the editor of Restoring America. I'm joined today by my colleague, Tom Rogan. Tom, good to be with you again.
Good to be with you.
I want to ask you about, there's been some developments with Trump and in the Middle East, especially with Israel and Iran, and this kind of butting of heads between Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and President Trump, it kind of seems to be escalating a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of that relationship and how it's affecting negotiations in Iran with the Iranians, and even how Israel is engaging with Iran?
Yeah, so it's increasingly clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump they have a declining relationship. That was evident with President Trump's trip to the Middle East recently, where he was, very excited to be with the Sunni Arab monarchies and talking about all these huge investments, and didn't visit Israel. But there are real tensions between President Trump's diplomatic agenda with Iran, which is to cut a new nuclear agreement that would replace the Obama JCPOA agreement 2015, which Trump left in his first term, and then basically the Iranians stopped complying. Trump wants to get a new deal, diplomatic accord. Israel wants to bomb Iran with the United States. And
Very different,
and there's a big gap there. That is the crux of the issue. And then the second order concern on the Israeli part is that the deal will not have teeth. So will there be snap inspections? Will the Iranians be able to enrich? Trump, I think, probably wants the Iranians, or would be willing to let the Iranians enrich to a very low level if it was monitored. The Israelis say, no, that's unacceptable. That's too far of a risk.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, but part of it here is that Trump he really wants to make a deal here. This is, if he's able to do it, this is kind of a legacy moment for him.
Right.
And in the meantime, he's kind of putting roadblocks in front of the Israelis who are eager to bomb the nuclear sites. Where do you see that going? Because I can't see Trump has completely rewritten the foreign policy playbook for a Republican president, especially in the Middle East. And before it was kind of like bomb first, ask questions later. Now it's like, no, we're not going to bomb except for as a last resort, and maybe not even then.
Right. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. President Trump really prizes these diplomatic deals. The Ukraine peace effort is struggling, which probably provides more impetus for him. He wants the Iran deal even more, so he has something on the board. From the Israeli point of view, though, there's the challenge militarily is that the Israelis almost certainly cannot destroy the Iranian nuclear program, beyond, say, 90%. Frankly, the United States might not be able to do it beyond 90% without ground troops. The Israelis, maybe 70% lower effect because of the type of munitions, refueling aircraft capabilities that only the US military has. So that sort of hamstrings them in a way. But, at the same time, the Israelis have this conception of an Iranian nuclear weapon as a precursor to a second Holocaust. Very small country, very small population in Israel. One nuclear weapon or two nuclear weapons would be catastrophic. Mm-hmm. And so there is a deeply emotive point guiding, I think, the strategic calculus. I think then another factor here, which might be playing into President Trump's strategy, is that the Netanyahu government is fragile. It's a coalition government, and he may be banking on it, falling sooner rather than not, and then a new government coming in, which would almost certainly be more amenable to a more concessionary deal.
Right, and the war cabinet there from the war with Hamas is still active, and the general consensus is that the minute that war cabinet is over,
exactly,
there's going to be new elections in Israel. I want to shift kind of perspectives away from the Israel one to the Iranian one. Iran seems to be much more interested in talking with Trump this time around as before, which is remarkable considering that they were trying to assassinate him even last year. Where are they in this negotiation, and are they actually engaging in a way that may seem that they might actually want to make a deal.
Well, and we don't know. They may still be trying to assassinate Trump. They're still trying to assassinate people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and Mark Milley and Brian Hook and others. Robert O'Brien, the former national security advisor. I think Iran's calculus now is that their economic fragility, which is very significant and enduring, sanctions on their oil exports have made a big hit to the economy. The regime is seeing increasing strikes. We've seen truck drivers striking this week. They fear internal revolution against the Islamic Revolution, and so they want economic, investment to return that would allow them to start paying essentially their supporters and getting economic growth, which would cool public tensions. So they're amenable to a deal. I also think they think that President Trump will bomb them if they don't cut a deal. And because of the Israeli military action that we saw against Iran late last year and the devastation that Israel has imposed upon Hezbollah, Iran's key proxy in Lebanon, they really are concerned, right? There's this fragility. Mm-hmm. The counterbalance to that, though, is Ayatollah Khamenei, who's the supreme leader, is, I think, significantly more hawkish than the government, and he has the ultimate say on foreign policy. So what deal might he be willing to make? And I think the critical point here will be low enrichment. I don't see the Iranians, Khamenei, agreeing to a deal where there is a permanent ban on low enrichment, maybe a delay of a year or two. But will Trump cut that deal? Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy, said recently that would be unacceptable for any enrichment. So there are these gaps here, but of course Trump can change his mind on a dime.
Right.
So that's the wild card.
And I think a point you made earlier that I thought was really interesting was that this is coming right as the negotiations and the attempts to negotiate a ceasefire and a lasting peace in Ukraine have kind of stalled out. But I mean, Trump he still really wants to be the guy that ended the Ukraine war, but he's also, I think, in a certain sense, kind of realistic of, I'm going to put my emphasis on the places where I think I can actually achieve something.
An Iran nuclear deal on paper is far easier to reach than getting the Russians to stop,
right,
conquest.
And in that sense,
which we're seeing.
Right, and obviously because Russia's a much bigger geopolitical power than Iran is,
right.
and there's a reluctance from the West to get more involved and put more pressure on the Russians in terms militarily. So.
And I do think we have to bear in mind that Trump will be aware of this from his intelligence briefings. The Iranians are very active still, both on that assassination effort against top U.S. officials. It's a theology, they want vengeance for the killing of Qasem Soleimani, big general, and it's religious motive for that as much as political. Mm-hmm. So it's very deeply felt. And then secondly, terrorist attacks in the West. A lot of different European plots that have been, one in the UK recently disrupted, where they were going to go and attack the Israeli embassy. What happens if one of those succeeds, and a lot of people die, or a very prominent person dies? How does that affect the Trump administration's political ability or interest in then continuing the deal? So the Iranians are dancing with fire on one side, even as the other side is trying to get a deal, which I think shows the contradictions inside the regime. But,
Tom, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Please be sure to subscribe as always, and hope you enjoyed the video.